Welcome to EWTN Live. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and this is our opportunity to bring you guests from around the world. Tonight, we will be talking with a top-notch historian about Marxism, its ideology, and its founder, Karl Marx. Before we get to that, though, we want to talk briefly with our EWTN Radio General Manager, Mr. Jack Williams. What's going on with EWTN Radio, Jack?
Well, let me ask you a question, Father Mitch. You know, we spent an hour earlier today on radio, and we do that every week, taking questions from our listeners. And frequently, not every show, but frequently we'll get asked the question that I'd like for you to briefly answer right now. Why are there no miracles today?
Who said there aren't?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so let me at them. Come on, put up your dukes.
But that's the claim of some of our, usually people I think that have a skeptical bent to begin with, and that's the claim that they'll make. We're very excited at EWTN Radio because Michael O'Neill, who has done, he's kind of known as the Miracle Hunter, and he's done some stuff on EWTN television in the past. People may have seen him on the Today Show, the Dr. Oz Show. He was featured in the National Geographic article about our Blessed Mother that was out, last year, or maybe a couple years ago now. But he is bringing his Miracle Hunter radio show to EWTN Radio.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And he talks about, you would think it's a very narrow focus, but really, it's a broad category when you start digging into it. He talks about Eucharistic miracles. He talks about past miracles, miracles that are being considered today. He talks about people whose causes are open, that have miracles that have been attributed to their intercession. He has guests on that look into that. Just all sorts of things regarding miracles that Michael O'Neill will bring to EWTN Radio, and that's going to debut on Saturday, October 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and then every Saturday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, you'll be able to hear a new episode of Michael O'Neill and the Miracle Hunter.
Wonderful. That sounds very good. Look forward to that being on radio. And we look forward to our guest tonight, so please stay with us. All right, welcome back. Now, our guest tonight is a noted historian and a professor of political science at Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania, where he is also the executive director of the college's Institute for Faith and Freedom. He is also the author of several fine books, notably A Pope and a President, John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and the extraordinary untold story of the 20th century. The book we're going to discuss tonight is called The Devil and Karl Marx, Communism's Long March of Death, Deception, and Infiltration. Joining us via Skype from Grove City, Pennsylvania, is Dr. Paul Kengor. Dr. Kengor, how are you this evening?
I'm good, Father Mitch. I'm a big fan. It's great to be on with you, and
thank you very much. I appreciate that. And it's a question. There are two questions that come to mind with your book. The first one is, why are you writing about Karl Marx?
Well, unfortunately, Marxism seems to be making a comeback. Just when, here we are over 30 years after fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yes.
And we thought we had defeated communism, right? We thought we had defeated Marxism. But if you look at polling numbers.
As a matter of fact, I saw photographs of this. They had a final clearance closeout sale on statues of Marx, Lenin, and Stalin. And they were selling them off for scrap metal in just as Soviet Union was shutting down.
Well, but unfortunately, there might be some buyers for some of those statues right now, especially outside of our universities. And if you look at some of the polling data, I mean, there's probably enough professors with busts of Karl Marx in their office, right, already. Yes. But you would think, by the way, that the cancel culture would be canceling Karl Marx today.
Well, why is that?
Well, the man had hideous views, not just on economics, not just on religion. We're going to get to all that. But he had some really vile racial views toward Black people, very anti-Semitic, surely was sexist. And I mean, applying the standards of the modern day cancel culture, I mean, you know, he said stuff that would make Stonewall Jackson blush.
Yeah. You know, it's something that a lot of folks do not understand. But in the 19th century, and even a bit earlier, there were theories about racial inferiority for groups that I did not belong to. I mean, basically, and it's not, you know, Nazis. They weren't around yet. But long before there were Nazis, Charles Darwin considered blacks an inferior race that needs to be eliminated like inferior cattle. And he was part of a tradition, and Marx, who was a strong evolutionist, also held that attitude toward people of African descent.
Well, you know, Father Mitch, I share in the book a really troubling account where Marx and Engels, who would study the cranial formation of people, they would make really nasty comments about a Negro person, as they put it. And in one episode, Engels is writing a letter to Marx's daughter. And Marx's daughter was married to a guy who was partly Cuban. His name was Paul Lafargue. And so because he was partly Cuban, to Marx, that meant that he had Negro blood in him. And so Marx and Engels are going back and forth trying to deduce how much Negro blood is in Paul, right? 1/8, 1/12. And Marx even referred to Paul, his own son-in-law, by the way, who committed suicide in a suicide pact with Marx's daughter. One of two Marx daughters who committed suicide in suicide pacts with their husbands. Marx referred to Paul as Negrilla, or the gorilla, because he was partly black in Marx's view. And Engels, in one episode, even writes a letter to Marx's daughter and says, so Paul is running for a council seat in a political district that contains a zoo. And so Engels says to Laura, Marx's daughter, well, being in his reality is that of a N-word. That is one step closer to apes than the rest of us. Paul would make an ideal representative of that district, right? And he and Marx found this funny. But this evolutionary aspect at Marx's funeral, Engels quotes Darwin. At Marx's wife's funeral, Engels quotes Darwin. So for them, Darwinistic materialism was a major part of their atheism. We as Catholics believe all human beings are made in the image of God, the imago Dei. Mm-hmm. But to Marx and Engels, human beings were made in the image of apes. They evolved out of apes. And that will redound to and influence their entire Marxist, atheistic, materialistic philosophy and views of religion.
I think that element of Marx's thinking is not commonly known. Most people focus on his Communist Manifesto. That's probably his most popular book, wouldn't you say?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, it was published in 1848. And I mean, there's not really anything in there, I suppose, about evolution, but statements like the entire communist theory may be summed up in the single sentence. abolition of private property.
Right.
Another phrase, abolition of the family, exclamation mark. Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communists. It's amazing, but Marx and Engels actually wrote about abolition of the family.
Yep.
If you go to the 10-point plan, right? Points 1, 2, and 3, abolition of property, abolition of land, graduated or progressive income tax, abolition of all right of inheritance, which is hilarious and hypocritical because Marx and Engels got all their money through inheritance. And then point 10, which is even, quote, free education for all children in public schools. It actually says that, the Communist Manifesto. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot in there that people don't know about. And part of kind of my mission, Father Mitch, is I think if we could just educate young people about what this really means. If you go to young people and say, so you like Marxism, huh? How about giving me your private property? How about giving me your iPhone? How about giving me your laptop? How about giving me your Starbucks? Right?
Or, in the case of some, your sneakers, because you spent too much money on certain gym shoes and sneakers. That that's exorbitant. That's not necessary. You're buying brand names and the names of stars. You spent money on that, not on the product. You don't need that. That's very much part of the mentality of living in a Marxist world.
Well, it's envy. Envy is a big part of it. And in fact, too, in the Communist Manifesto, so they have that line, right? Marx and Engels say, the entire communist theory or program may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property. And then I've heard some people over the years say, well, they didn't really want to eliminate private property. But if you read on, they double down on that. They even say, so you say that that we want to do away with private property. And at that point, he could easily say, nah, that's not what we mean, right? Mm-hmm. No, he says that is precisely what we intend to do. It's precisely what we intend to do. And also, too, thereafter, and you know all this very well. Lenin and Mao and Pol Pot in Cambodia, Cuba, Fidel Castro. I had a former student at Grove City College who had an aunt who lived in Cuba. She had a mango tree in her front yard, and she couldn't pick the mangoes from it because the state owned the tree, and they were hungry. The mangoes would fall off the tree. One night they go out, they bring in some mangoes, they cut them up and they eat them, and then they throw the peels out in the garbage. And then they realize in the middle of the night, oh, what have we done? They go out, they get the peels, they dig a hole in the ground and they bury them because the state owns everything. You don't own any private property. So you had all these different communists throughout history that would say, well, abolition of private property, okay, right? This is how I'll do that. In Mao's China, they had collective kitchens. Everybody pulled together their pots, their pans, their woks, their utensils. The only smoke, this is in Jasper Becker's book, Quiet Ghosts, the only smoke that was allowed to emanate was from the collective kitchen, where everybody had all their food. So the state nationalized everything. So oftentimes I'll run into people and say, well, I'm a communist, but I wouldn't take your sneakers, right? I wouldn't take your mango tree. Well, but other communists would. And how do you expect people to react to statements like abolition of private property? And by the way, our church understood this, which is why our church said abolition of private property. I mean, that's a biblical right. That's a natural right. That's natural law. Thou shalt not steal. I mean, this Judeo-Christian cave courthouse, you don't take people's private property. And if you do, you're going to need guns. You're going to need gulags. You're going to need to kill people. And Marx and Engels actually write in the 10-point plan, they say, of course, in the beginning, despotic inroads will be necessary to do this. In other words, yeah, we're going to need despotism. I mean, people aren't just going to give up their property without a fight. So it's the Marxist ideology that necessitates guns and gulags and leads to this vast field of poverty, despair, and even death.
A lot of folks don't realize that when the Bolsheviks took over Russia from an earlier revolution, the Menshevik Revolution, that had happened earlier in the year that of 1917, deposed the Tsar and tried to rule but didn't work well. The Bolsheviks were only 45,000 strong, and they took over a country of way over 100 million. They did so because they were absolutely ruthless in just killing the slightest opposition or disagreement, and became famous for this terroristic killing of people that have frightened so many others. In many ways, it was not unlike the terroristic killing that had been done by Daesh, the Islamic group. I forget the English word for it, but the Islamic group that took over northern Iraq, and it just killed people. Everybody was terrified. Soldiers ran away. That's how the Bolsheviks had acted, and
It is.
And this terror continued on. Yeah, ISIS was the English form of Daesh, but
it was
terrible.
It was M.Y. Latsis, who was the ferocious Latvian who headed up the first Cheka, NKVD, the secret police. And he said, the first question to which we ask the accused is this: to what class does he belong, right? And he said, the reason for this is we are exterminating the bourgeoisie as a class. And he was very candid about this. Mm-hmm. Now you think, Latsis could use a PR guy, right? He said, what are we doing? We are exterminating the bourgeoisie as a class. And here's something that people don't get. The Nazis would eliminate you based on your race, on your ethnicity, right? Well, the communists would eliminate you based on your class. So communism was hatred too. It's class hatred. Right. If you don't belong in the approved of class, if you're one of the groups that Lenin in his infamous 19 decree identified as harmful insects, then you could be eliminated by the state. So communism and Nazism, they share that in common. State power, murder by the state, and elimination of entire groups. It's just what they define it on. And for communists, it was class.
And one of the things I want to make clear to our audience, this is not rhetoric by some reactionary who just simply is anti-communist or something. This is citing what they said, what they wrote, what they did. This is not manufactured, and it's one of the problems that has gone on. So many folks think that you have to make up fake news, propaganda to criticize communism, but you do not. You simply quote what Marx said, what Lenin said, what Lenin did. Marx didn't do much except think big thoughts and write them, but he didn't do any political action as such. But Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky, they did. And this is a very important thing to know, that this is real history that simply is not known.
Yeah, Lenin said, he issued a decree December 25th, Christmas Day, 1919. It said, anyone who doesn't show up for work on this day, which they called the feast day of Nicola, needs to be taken out and shot. Mm-hmm. Needs to be taken out and shot. Actually wrote that down. In fact, you can find more written directives from Lenin than you can Stalin. Mm-hmm. Stalin usually just verbalized his orders. But Lenin, some of Lenin's writing is so vitriolic and so nasty and so hateful. And probably the worst of this, Father Mitch, is his stuff on religion. He said, all worship of a divinity is a necrophilia. Necrophilia, right? Necrophilia.
Which, by the way, so folks understand, necrophilia comes from two Greek words meaning love of death or love of the dead. And so that's what he's saying there.
And he said, there is nothing more abominable than religion, said Lenin. He said that as Marx said, religion is the opiate of the masses. It is a kind of spiritual booze, right? Spiritual booze. And some of his associates, Nikolai Bukharin, who was the founding editor of Pravda, he said, we must take on religion at the tip of the bayonet, right?
Yep.
The tip of the bayonet. It must be eliminated. And he said, communism and religion are incompatible. In fact, I must say here, when America Magazine in July 2019 published that article called A Catholic Case for Communism, the Catholic Case for Communism, that not only would previous church leaders and popes and Pius IX and Leo XIII and Pius XI and Pius XII and on and on and on, not only would they have said, you're out of your mind. You can't be a communist and a Catholic. Even Dorothy Day's Catholic Worker, I quote her publication saying, no, a Catholic cannot be a communist. But Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky and Bukharin and Marx and Engels would have said, you're out of your mind.
Right.
A Catholic can't be a communist. And in fact, Marx said, communism begins where atheism begins. And in his famous Opiate of the Masses essay, where he described religion as the heart of a heartless world, the soul of soulless conditions, religion is the opiate of the masses. He said in there, Father Mitch, the criticism of religion is the beginning of all criticism, right? So you start with religion as your starting point. That's your takedown point, right? Mm-hmm. That essay, the Opiate of the Masses essay, uses the word criticize 29 times. Maybe the only word that Marx used more than criticize was the word abolition, right? Abolish property, abolish the family, abolish religion, abolish all morality, as they write in the manifesto. So these guys were very revolutionary, and they knew that to get at the root, to create their new Jerusalem, right, as Pope Benedict XVI called it, right, their utopia without religion, they needed to take down the Judeo-Christian roots, the Judeo-Christian foundation.
And this is something that we very much have to pay attention to in these times. A lot of people are sending their children to universities where they are being indoctrinated in a Marxist critique. It
Absolutely
branches off into racial conflict theories, and which certainly come from this. Also, feminist conflict and sexual orientation conflict theories that are not really part of the experience of most women or of most people with same-sex attraction or anything, but there's a theoretical approach rooted in a Marxist critique that this is inherent in Marxist approach to life, that you see there is one group that must be in conflict with another group. In Marxism, you cannot have progress in history without conflict between these groups. That was how Marx picked up another German philosopher, Hegel. He did his dissertation on Hegel. And matter of fact, that's what the first time I came across Marx speaking of religion as opiate of the peoples was in his dissertation. But then he picked up on it later again. And he picks up this notion from Hegel that you have this one position, a thesis, you have an antithesis come up, something that opposes it, and then they clash and come together in a new synthesis. They come together. That model for history permeates Marxist thought. And this is what then Cardinal Ratzinger criticized about an earlier attempt to put Catholicism and Marxism together as liberation theology. That pitting one group against another contradicts Christian ideals of cherishing the otherness of your neighbor and loving them. And these are totally incompatible.
That's exactly right. And what Marxism does is it identifies a victim group, right? And that victim group will serve as the ultimate redeemer group. So in this case, it's the proletariat, right? So the proletariat, and a big part of this, and this is where the universities come in, right? Is it takes these kind of anointed, educated types, right, who have to educate the victim group. They have to elevate their consciousness raising, right? They have to be enlightened about their victimization. So they have to be told, no, 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 you're the victim here. You need to rise up. So the victim group can serve as the redeemer group for the revolution. Mark Rudd of the Weather Underground in the 1960s, and before that, Students for a Democratic Society, he talked in his memoirs recently about how he and Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn and others, they would go into the ethnic neighborhoods in Chicago, in Pittsburgh, right? The Irish kids, the Italian kids, right? The Polish kids, and they go there and they try to explain to them the importance of the revolution, right? And the Italian kids and the Irish kids and the Polish kids would be Catholic. They'd be like, get out of here. We don't want your communism, right? And they would end up, Rudd said, we'd get punched out by these guys. So imagine these guys
like my neighborhood.
So imagine these guys from Colombia laying there on the ground. Don't you understand what we're trying to teach you? We're trying to tell you Marx has figured this all out. And they're guys like, Marx is a commie. Get out of here, right? But the educational institutions have been doing this ever since. And if you go right now to the website of People's World, which is the flagship publication of the Communist Party, it's the successor to the Daily Worker. Father Mitch, there's a line in there that says in the About section, they're looking for cultural workers. Cultural workers. They've given up on the factory floor. They've given up on the West Virginia coal miner. They've given up on the Pittsburgh steel worker, the farmer in the Midwest. They're looking now for workers in the cultural vineyard, right? That's where they're agitating. And there are all brands of Marxists. There are sexual Marxists. There are Marxist feminists. There are gender Marxists. The Frankfurt School was about, through the person of Wilhelm Reich, who literally wrote the book, The Sexual Revolution, was trying to create a unified theory of Freudian Marxist thought. He took the worst philosopher of the 19th century, Marx, and tried to merge him with the worst of the 20th century, Freud, and said, wow, what a great idea. So Freudian Marxism. He literally wrote the book and coined the term the sexual revolution, which Kate Millett and the 60s radicals all picked up on. So for all of these groups, and still to this day, Angela Davis, right, spoke at the Women's March in Washington, D.C. in January 2017. Probably the best known feminist Marxist in America, maybe of all time. And as she's standing up there talking to the sea of young women, she's not quoting Marx and Engels. She's talking about Chelsea Manning. She's talking about flora and fauna. She's not talking about Marxism. She's talking about transgenderism. She doesn't mention Communist Party USA. She mentions LGBTQ, right? But it's this constant casting about for the new victim group that could be made aware of its victimization that they're hoping can help foment discord and revolution. Yep. And today, a lot of it's happening in race and through the issue of critical theory. They call it critical theory. A lot of what goes for this sort of cultural Marxism is taught in the universities as it flies under the banner of so-called critical theory.
We need to take a short break, but we'll come back to this in just a couple of minutes. I'll ask all of you to please stay with us as we continue to take a look at the Marxism and its modern manifestations. Thank you. All right, we are continuing on our conversation about Marxism. And, first of all, I want to ask you, you wrote this book called The Devil and Karl Marx, Communism's Long March of Death, Deception, and Infiltration. And Paul, by the way, just let folks know, you can get that at EWTNRC.com. It is item number 4447. It's written by Paul Kengor, excuse me. And you call this The Devil and Karl Marx. Are you trying to say that he was a Satanist?
No, I'm not. However, some have, and there are two. Yeah, there are two Marx biographers who kind of leveled these charges. One was the late Reverend Richard Warmbraun, who was who wrote the book Tortured for Christ. And by the way, if anyone's got a beef here, it was this poor guy, right? Tortured for 14 years in Romanian prisons. And he said that he said all the descriptions of Dante's Inferno cannot compare to the tortures in communist prisons.
I read that book, and I would urge anybody who wants to have an insight into the hellish nightmare communism, read that by Richard Wurmbrand.
Yeah, he said that he had torturers literally shout, "I am the devil, I am the devil," while they were torturing him. And he said one of his torturers said, "I've lived all this moment to release all the hatred and anger in my heart out on you."
Yeah.
And in fact, Wurmbrand said what he experienced was actually nothing compared to what happened in the prison of Pesti. And I've got about 12 pages on that. Father Mitch, you can even make a movie or documentary on this. It'd have to be X-rated. Yeah. I mean, forcing priests to consecrate human excrements and put it in people's mouths, torturing Christians, black masses. I mean, everything. True evil. And so Wurmbrand wrote a book called Marx.
So folks understand that this was, these were priests of the Romanian Orthodox Church who were driven mad. They were made absolutely mad. They lost their minds. And when they told them to consecrate excrement and urine, they don't think that they were like, oh, they were just weak. No, they had lost their minds from the kind of torture they went through. And they did this. It's horrendous.
In fact, Wurmbrand had a conversation with one of them and said, well, why did you do that? And the man said, do not judge me. I have suffered worse than Christ. That's what he told him. Yeah. Do not judge me. I have suffered worse than Christ. One of them named Florescu, whose son was beaten senseless and killed in front of him. The son says, Father, do not deny Christ. Do not deny Christ. And they killed the kid, right? And for just unspeakable stuff, unspeakable. Yeah. So Wurmbrand wrote a book called Marx and Satan. And he goes through a number of things. He believes that Marx was actually a Satanist. Mm-hmm. I can't prove that.
Yeah.
Now, somebody who's a much more careful scholar was Robert Payne, who wrote two wonderful, amazing biographies of Marx. One published by Simon & Schuster, one by New York University Press. The one at 1968, Simon & Schuster, I think it was a bestseller. Very thoughtful, British man of letters, British professor of literature and the arts. I mean, no, right winger. I mean, this guy, right down the middle. And he has a chapter called Marx's Demons. And he says that he thinks Marx very well might have been possessed. Mm-hmm. He said at the very least, he had the devil's malignity and the devil's view of the world. And he believed that almost like through the devil, he was doing works of destruction. So I very carefully say, look, I'm not going to make a judgment on that, but when you read the guy's poetry, when you read the things that he wrote, when you see the things that he said, at the very least, let's all agree this is chilling. It's very disturbing. We don't want to overstate things. We also don't want to understate things. And I'll give you one example that the two of those guys both focused on, Wurmbrand and Payne. Marx wrote a play called Ulanem, which is an anagram for Emmanuel. And in fact, Robert Payne said Ulanem, Manuelo, Emmanuel. And Wurmbrand said, no, this is actually a Satanist anagram for Emmanuel. The angel Gabriel says to Mary, right, you shall bear a child, his name shall be Emmanuel. And he He's this Satan-like creator character who, in the end, destroys the world, completely destroys the world around him. And Paine says Marx is Ulanem. He's playing the role of destroyer and executioner. And I would caution people, don't look up the word Ulanem on your computer. Don't Google it. Well, I guess you can, but I wouldn't advise it. First thing that will pop up is a Wikipedia entrance saying, yeah, Karl Marx wrote this play. And then you'll also see images, satanic images from the Google images because of what that word means. Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of thing that Marx was playing with. He wrote an 1837 play where he said, thus heaven I've forfeited. I know it full well.
Let me put it on the screen so folks can read it with you. It's called The Pale Maiden.
Yes.
So go ahead, cite
thus
that.
Heaven I've forfeited, I know it full well. My soul, once true to God, is chosen for hell. And the other one, he talks about this blood-dark sword that shall stab erringly within thy soul. Hellish vapors rise and fill the brain until I go mad, until I go insane. Who sold this to me? The Prince of Darkness sold this to me. So there's writings like this that he did. And I think it's more than just, he had a favorite line from Mephistopheles in Goethe's Faust. Mm-hmm. And people said he would chant this. He would not just recite it, he would chant this. And the line is, everything that exists deserves to perish. Everything that exists deserves to perish. That was a favorite line of Marx. And I think in a way that's kind of a credo for what he did, or at the very least, for what his ideology, whether he intended it or not, wrought upon the world.
Here's something that I think we need to keep in mind, given some of the events taking place today. Namely, by eliminating religion, and he also accepts the earlier philosophies from the 18th century that rejected the reality of original sin. He wouldn't believe in that, wouldn't believe in religion or God, but does believe in the devil. This mentality precludes the idea of redemption. You cannot experience any kind of redemption. All you can do is, as in the poem you quoted, that you want everything to perish. All reality must be destroyed. And that is very much something that we see being lived out on the streets of our cities, where the destruction of our past history, the destruction of, not only of people who were simply flawed, but even people who did incredible good, like some of the abolitionist statues are destroyed, and some of the early 19th century black leaders who had been educated despite the difficulties they had the gumption to get educated and become great spokespersons for others. That's destroyed. It's just this destruction of everything because there's no possibility of redemption. And that is their mentality that comes from the rejection of religion. And our culture is moving to that same model of no redemption for anybody. If they had one thing wrong, destroy them, destroy the past. That's what the communists did in Soviet Union and in China, and Pol Pot did the same in Cambodia, in Vietnam, all over the place. That's what communists did. And this is something that's dangerous in our own times.
There's probably, Father Mitch, the one question that I've been asked more than any in doing interviews for this book is there any connection between Marx and the philosophy and what you're seeing on the streets, the kind of tear down movement, right? Tearing down the statue. Yeah, and actually the close of the manifesto, everybody remembers the line, workers of the world, you have a world to win, right? Mm-hmm. You have nothing but your chains to lose. But there's a line in there where he said, communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement that goes against the existing social and political order of things, right? Whereas Marx and Engels might not be able to conceive of gender ideology or LGBTQ or any number of issues whatsoever, or certainly wouldn't even know who a Frederick Douglass is or Washington and Jefferson is. They would support any revolutionary movement that indeed goes against the social and political order of things. Marx said communism represents the most radical rupture in traditional relations, right? The most radical rupture in traditional relations. At the end of the Communist Manifesto, there's also a line where they called for the forcible overthrow of everything that exists, right? I mean, there's a forcible overthrow of everything that exists. So this idea, and Warnbraun said this, the thought that Karl Marx had these lofty social ideas for helping mankind, this guy wanted to burn down the house. I mean, he would be standing there in the middle of the embers, right? Fist in the air saying, now we're ready to move forward.
Yep.
He was the ultimate revolutionary. And you mentioned Satan. I don't even know if Marx believed in Satan because he was an atheist, right? But what's interesting is guys like him, Mikhail Bakunin, who knew him and was a socialist anarchist. By the way, Father Mitch, Marx even said, socialist anarchist? How could you be a socialist and an anarchist, right? But he agreed with Bakunin on the atheism part. And Bakunin praised Lucifer as this glorious first rebel, which Saul Alinsky did too.
Yep.
And the beginning of Rules for Radical, right? This first rebel who won for himself his own kingdom. So they might not necessarily even believe in the supernatural, but as a character, they like what Lucifer did.
Yep.
They like what Lucifer represents. To them, Lucifer rebels against God, as Alinsky said. He rebels against the establishment, and that's good. I like that guy.
I remember back in the 1960s, maybe all the way through the early 70s, 71 or so, that Madeleine Murray O'Hair, who had brought the case to the Supreme Court that had prayer and the Bible eliminated from the public school system, and then it went on from there, that she, within a few months before she died, had also said, people give Satan a bad rep. I'm here to defend him, and that he shouldn't be treated so badly. It's very odd that someone who would profess atheism would have, as Mick Jagger once sang, sympathy for the devil. And this shows up with Marx as well. It is an inconsistency and an oddity that we cannot help but notice.
As Saul Alinsky said, now he said this in an interview with Playboy magazine. I think it was 1972 before he died.
Yep.
And he said that if he had the choice between heaven and hell, quote, I would unreservedly choose hell. And even the Playboy interviewer was like, why? Right? Why would you say that? And he said, they're my kind of people. He said, I'd rather be with the have-nots, right? I would go down there and I would organize the workers or whatever in hell. And this is one among a number of Alinsky comments where when I've talked to progressives who like Alinsky, they'll say, oh, well, he was speaking tongue-in-cheek, right? They're always speaking tongue-in-cheek, right?
Yeah.
First of all, you don't know if he's speaking tongue-in-cheek. He may well be. But either way, if you were writing a book called Rules for Radicals and you're putting acknowledgments in the beginning of it, I mean, the beginning of my book here, The Devil and Karl Marx, my quote is from Ephesians, right? About fighting the principalities and the powers of darkness. Of all things, why would you pick an acknowledgement? I think the exact words is, lest we forget at least an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement, says Alinsky, to that first rebel who rebelled against the establishment and won for himself his own kingdom, Lucifer, right?
Yep.
Hey, not very funny, Saul. Not very funny.
Yeah. Yeah. and especially since he had spent a good deal of time as an understudy to Frank Nitti and other mobsters in Chicago who taught him a certain amount about the ends justifies the means. Now,
yeah, that's very much rules for radicals. Yes.
Yep. With this, there's a pattern here that we see with folks who tend to come from the more middle class part of our society, and yet who opt for this Marxist critique, and therefore they opt for overthrowing the system in which they got their education, they got the means of production and wealth that makes it possible for them to be these revolutionaries. And there are wealthy people who allegedly are financing a good number of the actions that are taking place on the streets, giving them hotel rooms. We have politicians who are running for office now, including Senator Kamala Harris, who finance getting them out of jail when they're arrested. You have that going on. You say, what are you thinking? Why are you in these nice, comfortable lives working to make life miserable for the economic group to which you belong?
Yeah, it's a good question, right?
Have you seen any insight into why?
It's a curious phenomenon, right? Limousine leftists, champagne socialists, mansion Marxists, what we call them. But Friedrich Engels' father was a wealthy capitalist and a very religious man.
That's right.
And in fact, I talk in here. I've got a chapter on Engels. What happened to Engels is really sad. Engels really talked about, I am struggling to be a good Christian. I am struggling to keep the faith. Kind of pray for me that I will stick to the faith. And Engels' father becomes so distraught that Engels is hanging out with guys like Marx, even before he met Marx, that he tries to send them away, right, to keep them away from those bad guys. But Engels, when he first met Marx, described him as the, quote, monster of 10,000 devils, right? Engels said that of Marx, monster of 10,000 devils. Marx's father, who converted out of Judaism into Christianity, asked Marx in a really, really kind of chilling letter, March 1837, is that heart of yours Faustian? Are you governed by a demon? I want to know. And so Marx too. Marx and Engels, this gets closer to your point, they inherited all of their money. All of the money that they got to do what they did came from their inheritance. Marx's parents cut him off. Marx's mother and his wife both expressed the wish that Karl would start earning some capital rather than just writing about it. When Marx's mother finally cut him off, he raged against his mother, and then he sent his wife, Jenny, out begging to Jenny's relatives for money. They all cut him off. So Engels became his lifelong subsidizer. And Marx never paid the family nursemaid anything. In fact, he got her pregnant behind his wife's back, the family nursemaid Lenchen. And then when she had a baby, he refused to acknowledge that the child was his, never gave him a penny of child support. And then Engels accepted responsibility. They named the kid Freddie after Friedrich, because Engels didn't care. He didn't care what people thought about him. He said, I got to step in. I got to save Marx's marriage. Yeah. I'm already saving him and his family financially with my dad's money. Now I got to save his marriage. But there's an irony, right? And I think some of it too might have a deeper spiritual explanation, maybe more spiritual than rational and psychological than political.
Yeah, that's possible. I think it is fair to say that Marx was critical of a very nasty situation of the early industrial age.
Yeah.
The treatment of workers by the owners of factories was horrendous. And the irony, that if you want to add on more irony, is that it was the work of Pope Leo XIII, obviously a Christian, in his encyclical on labor and on the mutual respect of workers for the owners and of owners for the dignity of the workers on whom they depend. He made that critique, and that promoted Catholics to go into the labor unions, which Marx could never have foreseen. He had no concept. And a more peaceful change took place than what Marx envisioned, at least in the
Catholic
West.
Church. Yeah, the Catholic Church has done a beautiful job with this. 40 years later, when Pius XI did Quadragesimo Anno, and he said, look, if you want to help the poor, if you want to help your fellow man, if you want to help workers, do the gospel, right? Be a Christian. Yeah. Follow Jesus. Don't follow a materialistic, atheistic philosophy that rejects God and calls for a complete redoing of the entire order, that has its anthropology wrong, that misunderstands human nature, that attacks religion. I quote in this book an amazing letter, Father Mitch, from Dorothy Day's Catholic Worker, where they're telling Earl Browder and Communist Party USA, which is extending this outstretched hand to Catholics, that Dorothy Day's Catholic Worker says, I'm sorry, we might agree with you on helping workers and helping the poor, but we cannot be communists. Communism and Catholicism are incompatible. You guys have a completely materialistic worldview. You are atheists. And look at Pius XII when he said, I have an idea for you. Let's herald St. Joseph the Worker as our
on May
model.
1st, the Workers' Day.
On May 1st.
You know, Dr. Kengor, we have flat run out of time. I'm so sorry. I wish we could keep on going, but I urge people to get The Devil and Karl Marx, Communism's Long March of Death, Deception and Infiltration by Paul Kengor. EWTNRC.com has it, item 4447. And may the Lord, I want to give you a blessing. May the Lord bless you and all of our viewers to keep them close to Christ and in love with his church. Lord bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you all, and thank you very much for the work you've done and for all of us to be alert, to stay faithful to Christ our Lord.